Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Family Business Matters. My name's Gail Crichton-Davis, and I'm talking with Lloyd Russell. And we're talking today about how to understand multi-generational dynamics. So, Lloyd, we hear a lot about the family tree, and then we also hear about the business tree. Now, how do they interrelate with each other?
Yeah, and it's a great question, Gail, because the family tree is very much a multi-generational thing, and it highlights where the family sits in what they call the three-circle model, and that's the family, the wealth, and the business. Mm-hmm. Or we can dilute that to emotions in the family, and wealth or ownership, and also income for the business. And so the family tree is very important for the current position. It's extremely important to get an understanding of where the family has come from, when, who has done what, who's taken over, and how people evolved out through the different generations. Mm-hmm. Because there may be numerous cousins and second cousins and that aren't in the business anymore, but they're still related to the people and that sort of thing. But when you overlay the current family business, genome as they call it, or tree, you're going to have probably two generations sitting inside the business, but you'll also understand where they are inside the business. Now, it raises a whole series of questions. Are they in the business as a family member, or are they adding value to the family business? And in that case, they have to have a proper position description for the position they're in. They may be a young person have come into the business, and they might only be a floor supervisor or part of a particular part of the business, and they've got non-family members that they answer to. So it's very important to understand that, and it's also very important to understand who inside the business that's not a family member but may think they're a family member. And that sort of stuff. And look, most family businesses have people that have come up with the older generation inside the family. Now that might be generation 5, we don't know, but they've come up with the current older generation, and the next generation is sitting inside there. But that person who's come up with the older generation is really attached to that generation. But the family member is attached to the family, and that sort of thing. So you've got to, I always consider that family continuity mm-hmm. is about your belonging and your attachment as a family member, but succession planning brings in a whole different animal. And in this session, we just want to talk about that attachment and that sort of thing. And so somebody who's been in the business for a long time has got great attachment to a particular family member. Mm-hmm. And if that family member is going to hand over to the next generation, where does that attachment break? And it domiciles in certain behaviours. And we'll talk a little bit later in this session about the behaviours. So that's why it's so important. But it's also critical if you're going to be bringing outside managers and outside executives, or even outside board directors inside a family, because you have to attach them to the purpose of the business. But you do have to keep a separation from that, from being too attached to the family and that sort of thing. So it's a delicate balance. It's a delicate balance, but it's something that you have to do. Recruiters in this area, there is only certain recruitment people that are very good at family business because they have to align to those family values, and those family values have come down through the generations. So it's a very much a balancing act to get it right, and yes, there'll be bumps along the road.
Yeah. And how do they make sure that whenever the people that are recruiting to bring in, that they do have that alignment to the family values? Is it like a business has the business charter or whatever? Does the family have something similar?
Yeah, look, most definitely, and we will cover this in significant detail in a future session. But it's called the Family Charter. Some people call it Family Constitution. I like to call it and most people call it a Family Charter because it's a very low-level legal document, but it's probably the family's most strategic document because it guides their behaviours, their principles, their values and all that sort of stuff. Yes, it has certain things in there that'll drive shareholders' agreements and those sorts of things, but it's about the expectations and obligations that people have in the family, and that can be as simple as when you become part of a Next Gen forum or whatever. So again, we won't dwell on that in this particular session, but yes, there's those. But again, we come back to that attachment thing, and it's it's a thing that we've heard about emotional intelligence or EQ, and there's intellectual quotient or IQ, and it's getting those two things in balance. Now, subsets of those we've heard 1,000 of. We call it social quotient, we call it values quotient. Look, they're really subsets of the balance between IQ and EQ.
Yeah.
But there's some very smart recruiters in the family business that are what they call interviewing for cultural quotient or community quotient. And that's very, while again I consider that they are a subset of a balance between IQ and EQ, I think when you start getting down to matching people inside the family and business genome and they're not family members or they're board members that are coming in, they're there for the board. And so we're looking at those sorts of things, and they do have to have a little bit of those two CQs.
Yeah.
Cultural quotient and community quotient, because the family will have those as well. So that's that's again, if we go back to the first episode about why is family business different or not just another business, and it's the fact of all those things. It's that big circle on top of it called the family, and they have all of the skin in the game. Yeah.
And how would you approach dealing with a situation where a non-family member has had that attachment to a family member, and that family member has moved to a different role as their generation has changed?
Yeah, you've opened up a dual set of dynamics that have to occur there, and let's deal with the family side of it first. Is generally speaking, we have a four-step paradigm. It's the formative years until a child finishes their education. Then they have a bit of a disruptive year, as we all do, somewhere between 16 and 20. Some of us can remember that. Some can't. Parts we don't like to remember. But then we come into the business. And then all of a sudden, somebody taps the older generation on the hand, on the shoulder and says, Johnny, it's time to hand over and give Fred a go, Well, that's a great thing, and yes, that's succession planning. But what happens inside that older generation's brain is they go, so I'm past my prime, I don't add any value anymore, I'm not relevant, I don't like bowls or golf, so I've got to go away and die. And no, we've got to think of these things a lot different, because in the formative years, when in that 0 to 7 and 8 and that sort of stuff, we're bouncing around on granddad's knee and grandma's knee, and they're telling us about the family knowledge, and I call it the family business knowledge. It starts here, and it's in their heart, it's in their head, and that's corporate knowledge that no one can have. And then you sort of go through to your education years, and then you've got your disruptive years, and then you've got what I call your go away and find your life and have a life and learn something, bring something back to the thing. But you're not going to come in as the CEO. And we go back to what we talked about, the charter there. And so you come in and you might be sweeping the floor, and that sort of stuff. But again, you've got to have good position descriptions. It's really critical that they know when to take their family hat off and go from there. But then as they come up into line management and that sort of stuff, Dad has to move over and not become hands-on manager, and he has to become a little bit of a leader.
Yeah.
But if Granddad and Grandma are there, they have to become, they've got another role of becoming a mentor and possibly even an ambassador and that sort of thing. So that's sort of the multiple steps. Because, you know, longevity in life is going to happen. You know, the chances of you and I living till we're 100 is moderately high.
Yeah.
Our kids, probably significantly high. And depending on depending on, you know, when people get married and have children, that, you know, I've got a client now that's got 4 generations working and owning the business between sort of 18 and 90 odd. And they've all got their faculties, and that's a different thing. Now let's go back, and because I think the critical point there was, what if a non-family member?
Yeah.
Well, you've got to identify those people and give them a role as well, and they have to become an operational role and make them be the same as if Dad or Granddad are moving on, as they become a leader and a mentor to young people in as well. Because what you don't want them to become is what I call a compliant sabotager.
Oh.
They are so compliant that it's all right, I'll make sure I look after Johnny or Freddie or whoever comes into the business. And the first time a decision's made, they're down in the crib room or something like that and they go, oh, Gail wouldn't have done it that way.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.